Ladies and gentlemen, with days of an extremely tense Bangladesh, India ties with targeted attack on minority today marked an exception as India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri met Mohammad Yunus, the chief advisor of the interim government in Bangladesh, where these targeted attacks have been happening right after he met his Bangladesh counterpart. From propaganda to what many have alleged as a program, Bangladesh and India have seen not only as a massive shift in the way two countries look at each other, but also Bangladesh Foreign Affairs Advisor Tauhid Hossain acknowledged a shift in the relationship between the two nations since August 5th, referring to it as an undeniable reality. August 5th is when Sheikh Hasina had fled Bangladesh, eventually taking asylum in India, and soon after the attacks against minorities had begun. In fact, it was almost 3 months ago that a video of Mohammad Yunus was viral where he could be heard telling the student leaders flanking him that if the violence against minorities doesn't stop, he would resign. Things have only worsened, the violence and the attacks. Today, India's envoy, while in Bangladesh, said they had frank, candid exchange of views, and that it has been conveyed. All the concerns about safety of minorities has been conveyed. The focus is on positive ties with Bangladesh, and attacks on cultural, religious and diplomatic properties have been discussed. India desires mutually beneficial ties with Bangladesh. A people-centric ties remains the focus and the shared vision for the welfare of all people. Also adding, there is no reason why this mutually beneficial cooperation should not continue to deliver in the interests of both our people. He went on to say, I have underlined today India's desire to work closely with the interim government, with the interim authorities. How should one read the statements, very measured statements by the Indian envoy in Bangladesh? And can India look at Bangladesh and the attack on minorities in isolation of what's been happening in India's neighborhood, from Nepal to Maldives to Sri Lanka? Ties that have been seeing the ups and downs, as some would say, is part and parcel of diplomatic ties. But remember, even as China has been flexing its muscles with these nations. We look into all of this tonight. But before I introduce my panelists, let me straight go to Barrister Miti Sanjana, who is an advocate with the Supreme Court in Bangladesh. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us. Very good evening. My first question to you, Barrister Miti Sanjana, how are people in Bangladesh looking at the diplomatic talks that have been held today? You know, it's been weeks of tension. It's been weeks of violence and targeted attacks in Bangladesh. So when the talks of the kinds that we saw today were held between top envoys, how are the ordinary people in Bangladesh looking at it?
Well, this is the first high-level meeting since interim government took charge. And we hope and we believe that this meeting should have some positive, forward-looking and constructive impact on the people of Bangladesh. And we really, I personally really appreciate the fact that Mr. Vikram Misri, he has highlighted the importance of people-centric relationship rather than, the policy of focusing on one person, on one-party relationship. So yes, we hope and we believe that there should be there must be a, relationship based on mutual trust and mutual respect towards each other. And India, it's a, republic, the republic characteristics of Bangladesh should be respected, and India should build a relationship with the leader of Bangladesh, who has been chosen by the people of Bangladesh. So we are really looking forward to a very
Barrister Miti
positive.
Sanjana, there's no doubt about that. India has always maintained this, that India has no role in choosing a government. However, it does have a role in maintaining the relationships and establishing relationships. And I think that's very, very clearly visible in the form of what we saw today about India's top envoy going and meeting and talking with the top leaders in Bangladesh. So there's no doubt about India's intention. But what I'm trying to understand here, Barrister Miti Sanjana, is while the ambassador did go on and reiterate the importance and the focus point of the two countries being very people-centric approaches and ties that have direct bearings in the people, is there a sense in Bangladesh that has been lost out over the last few weeks?
Well, in last few weeks, yes, the tension was there, and that there were some recent investigation that actually uncovered a disturbing trend of artificial intelligence being weaponized to spread disinformation, and which is really upsetting the people of Bangladesh, and which is really creating some unrest here, and. There were fake news floating through internet. There were propaganda floating through internet regarding some, false misinformation and disinformation. So it was really upsetting, and certainly this sort of meeting, it really, giving us some hope.
Ms. Miti, what is important is also the fact that you had very clearly Mr. Yunus also in Bangladesh say this, that he would resign if the attacks on minorities do not stop. They did not. This came in August. This statement by Mr. Yunus came in August, that if the attacks on minorities don't stop, he would resign, and that people need to have faith on him if he is to run the government the way he is to run. Now, with those strong statements, 3 months on, you still have attacks going on. I'm still trying to get a sense, and that's honestly why we have called you on the show, to try and understand as people ordinary, because we've had even where legal representation has been hard, where legal representation has been denied, where people have refused to even take cases up of those from minority religions, of those who are Hindus. We saw it in the particular case recently. Given all of that, are there people within Bangladesh who are saying, stop this?
Well, secularism is a fundamental principle of Constitution of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh is known for its religious harmony. And the country is, built in a non-communal spirit. And Quran says, "Lakum dinukum waliya din," which means to each his own religion. So those who are very devoted and practicing Muslim in Bangladesh, they do not have any sort of scope to interfere with the religion of others. So the news of communal attack, those are actually floating through internet. There are many false information, as I said. There are disinformation, there are misinformation. Of course, some fringe elements are there, but that...
No, but we're talking about verified information about communal attacks.
People of Bangladesh.
We're not talking about misinformation or disinformation. We're talking about verified attacks that has also been raised by the envoy. So we are not talking about any misinformation or disinformation for that matter. But I get your point. Thank you very much, Barrister Miti Sanjana, for joining us.
Political attacks, but there is no communal angle of those attacks. We condemn each and every attack.
Let me introduce my panelists at this point. Meanwhile, thank you very much, Barrister Miti Sanjana, for joining us with your perspective. Of course, we'll try and get a sense of what this really means when it comes to India and Bangladesh ties. Thank you, Barrister Sanjana, for joining us. I'm also being joined at this point by Veena Sikri, who's a former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh, Shilkant Sharma, former SG for SAARC, as well as Major General Dhruv Khatoj, Director for India Foundation. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your time. Ms. Veena Sikri, if I can come to you. We just heard a barrister from Bangladesh speak. And this is also being said a couple of times that, this is not a communal angle. This is not a communal attack. Amid all of that, what may be propaganda, what some have called program, how do you really look at what India's top envoy has spoken today. Very, very measured words. How do you look at that?
Oh, I think the visit by Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri to Dhaka was a very important one because we have conveyed simultaneously two significant messages. One, we have said, as we have said right from August 5th and August 8th, that we are prepared to have a normal relationship with this government, with the interim government or interim administration, and we are prepared to carry forward the cooperation with Bangladesh, in all the areas that it has already developed over the previous decades. And this message is very clear. But at the same time, the Foreign Secretary has conveyed unequivocally the message about the attacks on Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, and all religious minorities of Bangladesh. I'm absolutely shocked to see a barrister, Supreme Court advocate of Bangladesh, Ms. Smriti Sanjana, saying that this is the artificial intelligence and fake information and so on. I think saying something like this is a complete disrespect to the 15 million minority community members of Bangladesh. You're saying as though what they are talking is lies. You're saying that all the attacks on them, the destruction of property, the killing of people, the abduction of women, the destruction of economic livelihoods, the Hindu minority journalists who've been put in jail, all that is completely untrue. This is so wrong for a country to say that. And the world is worried about what is happening in Bangladesh. I think three words that Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri used to describe his discussions, his talks, say it all. He said the discussions were frank, candid, and constructive. I think with these three words, we get the full picture that he was completely unequivocal in our concerns about the attacks on religious minorities. But he is prepared that if that is looked after, then Government of India is very constructive and they will fully move forward in all cooperation to carry forward the bilateral relationship. And we want to maintain a good relationship with Bangladesh. We consider Bangladesh to be an important neighbor. And the attacks on cultural properties, he mentioned that as well. You must know that on August 5th, when Prime Minister left Dhaka, the first target of attack was the Indian Cultural Center in Dhaka. It was burnt to the ground. It was completely razed. And, he just, in the spirit of normalcy, said, okay, we will talk about it. But now, the Bangladeshis are pretending as though it didn't happen. So I think that our Foreign Secretary recalling that is very important. And he also recalled that we will not be able to tolerate this attacks on minorities, the destruction of their properties and their denial of their livelihoods. They're being forced to resign. Hindu teachers are being forced to resign, Hindu professors are being forced to resign. Hindu police sub-inspectors are being forced to resign. So, this is government employees of the Hindu faith and the Buddhist faith and the Christian faith, they are all being forced to resign. It is a very difficult situation for the people there. They have not faced such a situation since 1971.
Before I go to my other panelists, Ms. Sikri, if I can ask you this question. When we look at what's happened with the minorities in Bangladesh, and even as you said, and appreciated the words used by Vikram Misri, one would ask, yes, it was measured. Yes, it is for a very important neighbor. Yes, the strategic ties are hugely important. But was it as forceful as one would expect with what's happening in Bangladesh? But in diplomatic ties, in diplomatic language, it's very different. How would you put in this perspective for Indians who were listening to it all?
I think it was forceful because he balanced both the aspects. He said clearly that I've spoken about what I have to speak. I've spoken about the condition of all the religious minorities in Bangladesh, and he also gave the clear, distinct message that if these aspects are looked after, India is more than willing to take forward the constructive relationship with Bangladesh and talk about all areas, whether trade or water resources, others. But a discussion on these issues like trade, water resources, progress on these issues is going to be contingent on, looking after the interests of the minorities as well. Because as the Supreme Court advocate said, secularism is a fundamental principle of their constitution. So they have to show that they mean what they say. And the effort to push out the minorities of Bangladesh is a very serious matter. They're trying to push them out and get rid of the minorities just like Pakistan did.
Major General Dhruv Khatoj, let's just look at what's happened of late. If I can get you in, you had these massive protests towards the Indian High Commission in Dhaka. You've had citizenship kind of wavered. Those who want to come into Bangladesh from Pakistan, they don't need any specific permits and all. You know, a lot of waivers that have happened for those from Pakistan. And then you have the India-Bangladesh ties amid it all. How should one look at it, notwithstanding the other neighbors, but even if you look at just what's happening between Bangladesh and India?
Thank you, Sneha. Sneha, I think what is happening in Bangladesh is a very, very sorry state of affairs. Let me put it this way. You know, when the 71 war, the liberation war was fought, it was fought against a rogue Pakistan nation, which was committing genocide against the people of Bangladesh. Today, the same people of Bangladesh are doing exactly what the Pakistanis did to them. And I think it is a crying shame. They have lost all sense of humanity. And that starts from Mr. Yunus himself. Incidentally, Mr. Yunus, in the 1971 war, his family was convicted of siding with the terrorist groups. His family fought against the people of Bangladesh. They were party to the rapes and the murders which took place. And later on, Sheikh Mujib gave them all a pardon. Now, he comes from that lineage. What has happened in Bangladesh is a very clear takeover by Islamist forces. And I think if we don't understand that, we are in for very serious trouble. Muhammad Yunus is now, he's simply a pin-up boy. He's a child of the United States. He has been propped up there. The force behind him are the Islamists. What surprises me is that there is a very large body of people in Bangladesh, both from the Awami League and from the BNP, who do not like what is happening. I think it is time for the democratic parties in Bangladesh to stand up for what is right and for what is human. Otherwise, they are party to the crimes which are taking place. There are no soft words for it. Now, I'm glad that the Foreign Secretary has gone. He has given his views. He has given a message. Now, let us see how the Bangladesh government, it is an illegal government, incidentally, despite what the Supreme Court advocate has stated. I don't, I can understand what the Supreme Court advocate is saying and why she is very measured in her words, because should she speak the truth, her head will be on the chopping block within 24 hours from now. So I can understand the fear in which she has been placed, and she is speaking out of fear.
Major General Khatoj, to be measured is one, and to downplay a reality, to just whitewash a reality into something totally different is also very different. That's not what is measured. Unfortunately, even though she was my guest, I don't agree with what the barrister said, because you really cannot downplay the truth of what is happening. You can't call something which is absolutely outrightly communal as non-communal, and that's exactly what she did. I get where you are coming from as well. There's obviously a lot of stress, tension, violence in Bangladesh, and sitting there and speaking there is possibly a big danger by itself. Shilkant Sharma, if I can get you in. Now, here's the larger picture as well. India and Bangladesh, very worrisome, troubled relations, violence after violence. You've had a very measured statement from India. But can India and Bangladesh be seen in isolation from what's happening in India's neighborhood? And that's also a big concern. China has quite frankly been flexing its muscles for years now. And it seems like you have Sri Lanka doing the balancing act between India and China. You had Maldives towards China, India. Now the relations are on the mend. We've seen what's happened in Nepal as well. Can India and Bangladesh, or can India afford to see India and Bangladesh in isolation of the neighborhood?
Well, I might sound counterintuitive, but it's important that when you have a problem, you look at it in its perspective, and contain that problem. Now, what you are saying is escalating. You're trying to connect what is happening with Bangladesh to other neighbors, whereas in each neighbor, with each neighbor, our relationship has been going on at a individual pace. It is there's a connection, but we should not confuse one with the other. We are talking of diplomacy. You see, today's event is a diplomatic event in the sense that at the foreign secretary has gone and met his counterpart at the invitation of Mr. Hussein.
Correct.
And so he's carrying a message at the top from the top leadership in India, and he recalls in his statement that ever since Muhammad Yunus has come, we have been playing by the book. Our Prime Minister was the first to congratulate him and talk to him. Then our Foreign Minister has met his counterpart in New York. So we have been in touch with them. And now this is a structured discussion which the Foreign Secretary has had. So this is diplomacy, and why diplomacy? Because the relationship is very valuable. We have invested a lot in Bangladesh, and I think there's a mutual, relationship. Now, there are people who are bent upon destroying it. There are people who come back now after 20 years of being in the cold. They want to wreck everything. So there are irresponsible statements coming. And but we have to talk to the responsible people and convey the correct message, which I think our Foreign Secretary has conveyed. And as Ambassador Veena Sikri said, that he also mentioned that it was candid and frank. So he didn't mince his words. He must have conveyed this. But what is important for us is that this relationship has to be conserved and put forward. There are challenges, no doubt, there are challenges. But these challenges have to be dealt with at appropriate places. You see, if we escalate it by doing these things, by reaction and counter-reaction, then it doesn't solve. And this is the problem with India's neighborhood. In Nepal, when something happens, people come on the streets and start, raising slogans. Now, if we react to that at that level, it doesn't solve the problem. Same thing in Bangladesh. You see, it's a very populous country, 18 crore people. And if they're sarfaraz, they are mad guys, even 0.1% of them make a very large crowd. So you have to see where the proportion is. And the attempt at diplomacy is to somehow the other move things in a proportionate way, in a right direction. So what we have done is conveyed the message in the best manner possible and wait for the results. As for the denial part, that is characteristic, that is very characteristic of all our neighbors. And Bangladesh, actually, the language and the jargon which is coming from them is very similar to that of Pakistan. They do things in India and then they say, we are not involved. So like these guys, now they are saying we are not involved. They are denying the burning down of the cultural center. They are denying attacks on minorities. And like there's a opposition leader who said from Bangladesh, trying to preach us that if you have to solve the things, then accept the problem. First thing is to accept the problem. But my dear friend, when we tell you the problem, you say it is an exaggeration. So how do we accept the problem? When we say that minorities are butchered, you say it is exaggeration. So that way you cannot really come to some kind of understanding. But this kind of a lingo is very characteristic. And, this crowd coming to our High Commission in Dhaka, BNP raising slogans. Now, BNP has come to life after 20 years. Their cases against them have been withdrawn. But they were involved in attacks against Awami League in 2008, 2009. And Hasina was under deathly threat. So these things are forgotten. And all Bangladesh's present regime's backers who are sitting in, comfortable capitals, they are completely unbothered about these things, like they were in 1970, 71.
Right, I totally get what you're trying to say. Let me just get in Major General Dhruv Katoch again, sir. Let me just try and get him. Do you agree with what Mr. Shelkan Sharma has said? Do you agree with his perspective that Bangladesh has to be treated for what Bangladesh is and not really juxtaposed with what's happening in the neighborhood overall? Would you agree with that paradigm?
So, I've got no doubts about what he's saying. That is correct. What is happening in Bangladesh is specific to Bangladesh. But where I disagree with Mr. Sharma is on a very specific point. You see, what is happening in Bangladesh is, I can understand if there hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshis come up on the streets and raise anti-India slogans. That is par for the course. I've got no problems with that. But when they come out and carry out murder, rape and root of the minority community, that is unacceptable. That is exactly what the Pakistanis did to them. And I would like to make it clear to to all the viewers, at that time, General Niazi, who was the commander-in-chief of the Pakistan armed forces there, he told his troops, change their lineage. What he really meant was rape the women, change the entire lineage of the Bengali population to get them on their knees. This is exactly what these people are doing.
Right.
Or has the lineage changed?
Okay.
I think what is happening in Bangladesh is a shame. The people of Bangladesh, they have to stand up for what is right. They cannot behave like cowards and expect India to stand up for them. It is their battle. If they believe in secularism, then fight for it. You cannot do what you are doing. You know, they have massively butchered the minority community. In simple words, it is unacceptable.
Right. Let me just get in Veena Sikri. Right. Veena Sikri, in fact, obviously emotions are very high. People are angry. But India is always, accused of at some level of being a big brother attitude, of having a big brother attitude. That was one time during the whole India policy diplomacy that, India was told India is trying to be a big brother and so on and so forth. And then you have, you just heard Major General Dhruv Katot say India can't do everything. It is their problem. They ought to stand for what is right and make it right. India can't get into everybody's affair. Where is the ball today? It is in Bangladesh's court, specifically after what the Indian envoy said today. But how is this going to see any form of resolve? Is there going to be any sense of normalcy at all? Because if you speak to people who are in Bangladesh, they'll say things are normal, but everybody knows it isn't normal when it comes to minorities.
Yeah, I must tell you that it depends on who you speak to in Bangladesh. If you speak to members of the interim administration, I don't even call them interim government because they are constitutionally invalid. They're not even there constitutionally. So if you speak to the interim administration, yes, they'll say everything is normal. The Supreme Court advocate is talking about that. But if you speak to people on the ground, they're already saying that agei bhalo chilo. It was better before. They know that their situation is dire because there is no police, there is no law and order in Bangladesh. The police is not functional because so many of them were killed after 5th of August. And so now the army has been given magistracy power, but they're not able to control the situation. And they don't want to because then they'll be prevented from going for UN peacekeeping operations, which is their main source of revenue. So I think that we have to understand that we don't want to tell the Bangladeshis what to do. But on a question like the killing of minorities and pretending that they're not killing the minorities, this is not going to be allowed because everybody in India is totally het up, whether it is West Bengal. Even Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee is facing a lot of ire from the people of her state because they're angry at what is happening in Bangladesh. And I tell you that all the religious communities in India, the Citizens for Fraternity led by Dr. Yaqub Qureshi and Dr. Najib Dang have written a letter to Muhammad Yunus saying that as Indian Muslims, we are ashamed of the attacks on minorities in Bangladesh, which is against the tenets of Islam. Such attacks on minorities are against. So all communities in India are totally het up because this is not the way. Pakistan did it to its own people. We now see that there's no minorities left in Pakistan, and I don't think in Bangladesh is going to happen. They're not going to be allowed to happen like that. So India is going to take the correct action and the correct decisions. We're going to tell the people of Bangladesh, we're happy to be friends with you and carry on, but this is unacceptable. This has to stop. And you've got to, reduce this intolerance. You've got to live up to your own constitution and follow a policy of secularism. And please let them live and let live. So that's very important. I think that message has gone straight and clear with the Foreign Secretary's visit there. Because he said that we want the bilateral relation to be positive.
Absolutely.
And mutually beneficial. Yeah.
Absolutely. Shilkant Sharma, my last question to you. How would you look at the international community and their response? If you have something happening, all right, I think Mr. Shilkant Sharma has left us. Major General Dhruv Katot, if I can ask you this question, How do you look at international community, their responses to what's happening in Bangladesh, to the statements that India has been making, to the counters that have been coming from Bangladesh? Are you happy with that, or do you see it as largely silence, in contrast to how they would speak for several other issues internationally?
You know, I'm very surprised at the reaction of the West, especially of the United States. They have maintained a they have maintained a silence which is unacceptable. Otherwise, we have massive protests going on when something happens in Gaza or something happens anywhere else in the Muslim world. But here, the Muslims are ganged together of Bangladesh, and they are killing the minority Hindus with the active connivance of all those who are at the helm of power. And the Americans still talk of democracy, and the West still keeps talking of democracy, and they fail to take any action. It is exactly what the Americans did in 1971 when the genocide of the Bengali people was taking place, and they chose to side with the perpetrators. Even today, the West is siding with the perpetrators. Yunus is their man. Yunus has been installed by the West. He's their puppet. And now they don't know what to do. So they're keeping a dignified silence as if nothing has happened. And I think this is going to go back onto the West as an example of shame. There are no protests taking place in the Western universities, whereas the whole world should have been aflame by now as to what is happening in Bangladesh. Sneha.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Veena Sikri, as well as Major General Dhruv Katoch. Thank you so much for your time. Shilkant Sharma had to leave us a while ago. This is a very sensitive issue, but I think India has made its mark yet again in a very, very measured statement, communicating very clearly of what their expectations are from not just Bangladesh, but also the world. Thank you very much for joining us.